So we're trying to improve the environmental health of the Burren, and we want to reward those farmers who succeed in doing this. And in order to fairly reward those farmers, we've developed a farmer-friendly field scoring system. It captures the environmental health of every species-rich field in the programme on an annual basis. This scoring system is applied to both the upland Burren winterages and the lowland Burren grassland fields. It takes into account the various factors and indicators of environmental health and good management, such as appropriate grazing levels, suitable feeding systems, good water quality, and low levels of immature encroaching scrub and weeds. So where we are now is one of these upland winterages. And these are actually extremely low input systems in the conventional sense, but they're actually extremely high input when you consider the farmers' labour, herding the animals throughout the winter, also their labour in terms of maintaining the beautiful stone walls which function as their boundaries, keeping back scrub or maintaining water sources. So they're high input systems in that way. They're also high input in that they require a huge amount of skill by the farmer to be aware of the grazing requirements that are necessary on each of their fields. We have this field scoring system which is completely field-based and farmer-centered, and it functions in that any issues that may be present within the field are recorded through the scoring system, and also the severity or the impact that these issues might be having, be it at water sources, be it the lack of grazing or insufficient grazing or poor timing of grazing or encroaching scrub, common issues that many fields have. It's a yearly based scoring system that captures the farmer's input and their hard work. So here we have our scoring sheet, and this is how the scores are obtained for every field. There's 10 criteria, and they're all very reflective of what is in the field, but they're also adaptable to any field within the Burren for all the different farmers. And they're clearly understandable by the farm advisor, by the farmer himself or herself, so they can change what needs to be changed, and they know where they're going in certain directions. Also, of course, it allows a good monitoring of the progress, be it improving or declining over time. One of our main activities is to go out on these winterages to assess the grazing level and score it as such. So what we look for is essentially no cattle, in most cases, being on these winterages, but still a huge sign of cattle having been there. And these signals are given to us through either a fresh growth of clean vegetation with no underlaying grass litter, which would show undergrazing. And you can also use evidence such as cattle dung to show that there's been a good animal presence, or alternatively hoof marks or small bits of bare soil, which also allow for regeneration of the annual flowering plants. And in general, you see the quality and the freshness of the growth in the spring and summer, and the abundance of the flowering plants that are able to thrive due to this quality high-level grazing that occurs in the wintertime. So the overall idea behind the scoring system is that it provides the incentive for farmers to self-improve in their management of their fields and their farms. And it puts them right in command of the payments they will actually receive at the end of the year. And that not only means that they can benefit from that, but us as a society benefits because the landscape is well managed, the biodiversity is at its prime and continues to persist. So it benefits all the actors and all the people that are part of this living landscape.
When we first started out on the Burren Life project, we focused very much on winterages. This is where we knew that all the rare species were and where the real interest in the flora and fauna of the Burren was. But as we went on, it became evident that there was another type of grassland which was equally, if not even more rare. And that is what we call Burren lowland grasslands. And at the moment, we're stood in a really nice meadow-type grassland. They differ in the winterages mainly in the fact that they've got deeper soil. Because they've got deeper soil, they have a slightly different flora. They have a more meadow-like flora, and they're also more easily improved agriculturally. So a lot of these grasslands have disappeared. If you look around the Burren now, most of the bright green fields historically would have been like this really nice species-rich grassland. But when we decided to include these Burren lowland grasslands within the Burren programme, we had to develop a scoring system like we had for the winterages. And the thing was, whereas in the winterages we can look and say a winterage is more or less as it should be, these you can't. They vary incredibly. Some of them are really, really species rich with really rare flora. Others are less interesting, but they still have a value. If they were outside of the Burren, they'd be wonderful grasslands, but in the Burren, they get lost against the background of really interesting grasslands. So we developed a system whereby we look at 5 groups of plants. They range from group 1s, which are really agricultural weeds, but they're quite important for pollinators. So if they're there, they might be important for less species-rich grasslands. And slowly, as you go up the groups, they become less able to tolerate more intensive grazing, less able to tolerate fertiliser, and then you eventually come to the prima donnas, the group 5s, the ones that don't like fertiliser, really don't. They can't cope with a lot of competition with other grasses. So we look at those 5 groups of species, and depending on those 5 groups of species, how many are there, we can then put a value, a conservation value on the field. So we have 5 different conservation values which go from A to C2. C2 is better than an agricultural grassland. They're really, really important for pollinators in particular. And this is where you'll find a lot of rare bee species and a lot of rare butterfly species hanging on. So the scoring system we ended up developing for the Burren lowland grasslands has similarities to the Wintridge one, in that we also do look at how well grazed and how well managed a field is, how many problems it's got. Does it have an issue with encroaching scrub? Does it have problems with dense bracken? Does it have problems with weeds? Is there a lot of feed site damage? We also then go on to look at the species, and the reason we didn't just want to look at species like a lot of the European programmes do is because if you're waiting for things to improve in terms of species, it can take a while. They can disimprove very quickly if you put fertiliser on or if you overgraze something, but to get them to move up and become more and more species rich can take time. So we wanted something that would act as a carrot and take the farmers' interest, that they could get a result quite quickly and improve the score by, for example, improving the grazing levels, managing it better, sorting out the scrub issues, because once those things are sorted out, the species will come on behind. So we've got a whole scale of points depending on what the plants are indicating, whether they're indicating that it's a really species-rich grassland, whether they can tolerate more grazing, more fertiliser, that sort of thing. So over the time, we will look at the group 5 species first. If you get over 30, it's an A. Then you look at the group 4s, add them on. If it's over 30, it's a B1, and so on down to a C2. So that way we get conservation value for each field, and we then add that to the management and the issues, and that's where we get our final score from 1 to 10. And because these fields are relatively easy to improve compared to a Wintridge, a lot of them are quite accessible, they've got a deeper soil, you could turn these into intensive agricultural grasslands. So we actually pay the farmers a higher rate on these grasslands than we do for a Wintridge, because really the farmer in theory is losing more money by not turning them into agricultural grassland. So we want to put a value on these flowers and pay them to keep the flowers and all the things that are dependent on these flowers: the bees, the butterflies, other insects, the ants.
One activity we trying to discourage with the Burren programme is that of silage feeding on a Wintridge. When round bales of silage are fed on the Wintridge, the cattle tend to congregate in one area. There tends to be a lot of dunging, there's nutrient build-up, there's a lot of muck in one spot, and the cattle tend to not graze the further stretches of the Wintridge. Why would they go and go off up a mountain to get a small bit of less palatable grass when they can stand around and wait for some nice big silage bales to come along? So in terms of scoring in this field would score a 0 because it's not being well grazed out. There's a lot of pollution here. The increased nitrogen levels will lead to a loss of biodiversity. There wouldn't be any payment on the field, which would hopefully discourage the farmer from a financial sense to not feed silage here. We're trying to encourage the farmers to move away from this damaging practice.
As an alternative, the Burren Life Ration was developed. It provides the pregnant cows with the additional protein they need to be able to digest the rough vegetation. It also provides essential vitamins and trace elements to stay healthy, and the protein boosts their appetite, so they eat their nuts, go for a drink, then graze the rougher forage that they would have otherwise left behind. It is this tighter winter graze that helps ensure that the Burren flora thrives in the summertime. To ensure farmers move from feeding silage on the Wintridges to the more beneficial ration feeding system, fields where silage is fed score a 0, which means the farmer doesn't get any payment for that field. This financial impact, alongside the health and herding benefits of feeding the Burren Life Ration, means that most Burren farmers have moved away from feeding silage.